Mental health is a growing concern in the public consciousness, so it makes sense that musicians are more openly addressing the issue in their work. Just take bipolar disorder, which has afflicted musicians at least as far back as the composer Schumann. More recent albums have made this disorder their central topic, like Halsey's third studio album, Manic. It was created during a period of the same name, which is why you can find just about any genre of music on this album. Country, pop, rock, and pieces of anything else. While it may seem sporadic, each song is connected by Halsey intimately laying out her emotions. Every line is carefully crafted to bring as much meaning as possible, but how does this vulnerability impact the sound of the album, where even the poppiest songs like Still Learning, Graveyard, and the hit single Without Me all sound personal despite fitting next to any other song on the radio? What makes Halsey's Manic sound so human? These songs on Manic usually start with a small melody played by a single instrument, like this guitar at the beginning of Without Me. This melody follows the chord progression 6-1-5-4, a variation of the 1-5-6-4 progression used in just about every pop song. While the first chord here is minor, the progression ends on a major chord and gives it an uplifting sound. Measures 1 and 3 play single notes within the chord progression, while 2 and 4 hold out the entire chord. This makes small, 2-measure-long sections of tension and release. All of these factors create a happy and relaxing melody, but what makes it sound alive is the placement of the notes. Notice that they don't perfectly line up with the rhythm, hitting either slightly early or late, as if played by hand. The choice to use a guitar in this melody is also part of the intimacy here. It's hard to tell what kind of guitar is playing this melody, but an electric jazz guitar sample from Omnisphere sounds like a good start. Some effects are added to make this guitar more interesting. There's a chorus to widen the sound, a flanger that creates motion by moving a comb filter up and down, and a reverb to blend it all together. This is an example of one note, but not every note in the melody sounds the same. Each drum of a guitar is slightly different, adding another source of variation. The impact of all these deviations becomes noticeable if we take them away by playing the melody on a synth instead of a guitar. It still sounds like a good pop melody, but doesn't feel as alive as when it's played on a guitar. Adding subtle imperfections in rhythm, volume, and sound all humanize a typical pop melody. There are a bunch of other sounds in these melodies that add depth, things like pianos and synths, but the most intimate one is Halsey's own background singing. Sometimes she holds out a few notes, like in Graveyard.
It's crazy when
This vocal hits notes that match up with the chords happening at the same time. It starts on C sharp, which is in the F sharp minor chord, and then goes to B, which is in the G major chord. These background vocals start like any other recording of Halsey singing. Of course, I don't have that, so we'll just make do with this random female vocal sample. Putting the sample as it is in the song would get in the way of the lead vocal, so some heavy effects are needed to put it in the background. Removing a lot of high frequencies and adding a lot of reverb makes it sound far away and leaves plenty of room for Halsey's lyrics. A vocal is probably the most personal sound with a nearly infinite amount of variation, so it makes sense that this background vocal adds an intimate touch. The human-made sounds continue into the drums. Of course, these pop songs use typical pop drum samples, but they also use claps. Not heavily processed ones, but live-sounding claps, like in Graveyard.
oh, 'cause I keep digging myself down deeper. I won't stop till I get where you are.
These claps play a 16th note rhythm with a variety of different samples. It's easy to imagine someone is clapping along to the music, making it feel more personal. The rest of the drums are made up of heavily processed pop staples like a constant closed hi-hat, a snare, another snare, and a kick. It's worth wondering why the rest of the drums aren't also switched for something live. Doing this certainly changes the sound of the song.
Oh, 'cause I keep digging myself down deeper. I won't stop till I get where you are.
There are songs on Manic that do make the switch, like 3 AM and Alanis Interlude. But songs like Graveyard are trying to be pop songs. They need certain sounds that listeners expect, sounds like these electronic drum samples. The challenge is adding a personal touch to this pop formula, and placing rhythmic live claps on these drums helps reach that goal. Another sound listeners expect in a pop song is a heavy bass. Not every part of these tracks can add to the humanness, and the pop songs on Manic usually go with an 808 to fill the low frequencies, like in Still Learning. This 808 plays the root notes of the chords, with a G sharp matching the G sharp major chord and G matching the G minor chord. One of the last notes also jumps up an octave, adding a bit of energy. The bass line is played with a straightforward 808 sample. This 808 brings low frequencies in a way that modern listeners expect in a pop song and is nearly impossible to do with a live instrument. In some ways, these required artificial sounds make the more human parts of these pop songs stand out even more. That's a quick look at some of these songs on Manic that add an intimate touch to the pop formula. Let's see if we can take these ideas and make a new pop instrumental that captures the same human feelings. To recap, there was a melody with a heavily affected guitar playing both single notes and chords on a 1-6-5-4 chord progression. The slight variations in rhythm and sound of this melody made it feel alive. And behind the guitar was Halsey's own background vocal, sparsely holding out notes and adding some intimacy with a human sound. The drums combined a variety of claps, almost sounding live, with pop drum staples. And the bass was an 808 playing notes in the chords, sometimes jumping up an octave. Since these songs usually start with a melody played by one instrument, here's a guitar melody I made. The chords here match up exactly with the 6-1-5-4 chord progression, just put in the key of E. Sadly, I don't have a real guitar, so I recorded this on a synth. The sound is an electric guitar sample with some chorus, flanging, and reverb added until it seemed interesting. I still added variations in rhythm and sound, and it's not the same as a real guitar, but I think the imperfections that are there show the general idea. The next part to add to the melody were some female background vocals. This vocal stays in the notes of the chord progression, only playing near the ends of phrases. Again, it was made from a random female vocal sample. I don't have any recordings of Halsey singing. We said the vocal should be in the background, so I took off a lot of the high frequencies and added a lot of reverb. For the drums, I put together some pop drum samples and added some claps on top. I didn't record the entire clapping part, but put together some different clap samples. And they're not perfectly in rhythm, randomly moved before or after the beat, as if they're clapped for real. The pattern follows 16th notes, with some claps removed to create a bouncing rhythm. The rest of the drums follow a standard pattern. The snare is on beat 3, hi-hats hit every 8th note, and there's the occasional kick. The claps fill out most of the rhythm, so the rest of the drums don't need to do that much. And finally, the bass. This normal 808 sample doesn't always play on the root note, but it does stay inside each chord, with the last measure jumping up an octave. That makes up the finished instrumental, using ideas from the songs we looked at on Halsey's Manic. It certainly has a pop sound, while also incorporating the elements we found to add that intimate touch. Hopefully this gets you to listen a little more closely to other pop songs on the radio, and reveal some of what makes Halsey's Manic sound so human. Thanks for listening. Leave a comment and let me know what you think of Halsey's Manic. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel.